Hello, my name's Arlena. 10 years ago, my mother drove me into the snowy woods with a picnic blanket, a thermos, and a lie. She said, "I'll be right back." She never came back. They told everyone I wandered off, said I was unstable. Then they erased me from our home, our family photos, even the inheritance I didn't know existed. Now I'm back. And the question I keep asking myself is this: was I the secret they were hiding, or the truth they were afraid of? They say your earliest memory shapes you. Mine was snow, deep, blinding, and endless. I was 8 years old, humming in the back seat of Mom's rusted SUV, legs dangling above the torn floor mat. Outside, snow flurried sideways across the windshield like tiny knives. Inside, silence. No music. No talking. Just Mom's tight grip on the steering wheel and her oversized sunglasses that didn't match the winter storm around us. She hadn't said much all morning. Not during breakfast. Not while she packed that threadbare picnic blanket or the half-empty thermos of cocoa. I'd asked where we were going, and she smiled thinly. "A birthday surprise," she said. It was February. Cold even by Montana's standards. Swan Range had been shut down to all but locals, and even they stayed indoors unless absolutely necessary. But here we were, Mom and I, driving into the belly of the storm. I remember my boots tapping the back of her seat, my mittened hands pulling at my scarf. I was excited. 8-year-olds don't think about frostbite or isolation. We think about hot chocolate and storybooks and maybe, just maybe, a sled hidden in the trunk. When the car came to a stop, there was no lodge, no lake, just trees, dense, dark, and silent. Snow swallowed the road behind us. Mom killed the engine and turned to look at me. "Get out, sweetheart," she said gently. I blinked. "Here?" She nodded, already opening the trunk. "Just for a little picnic." "Remember that book you like? The one with the bear and the girl who builds snow forts? Bridget and the Winter Bear? That's the one." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She laid the thin blanket out on a patch of cleared snow, placed the book beside it, and handed me the thermos. Then she leaned in and kissed my forehead. Her lips were dry and cold. "I need to grab something from the car. Stay right here, honey. I'll be right back." I watched her walk away, watched the driver's door close, watched the brake lights flash once. Then, nothing. The car didn't move for a moment. I expected the door to open again, for her to come back, laugh, say, "Just kidding," like moms do when they're being silly. But then, the SUV reversed slowly, tires slipping slightly. It turned toward the trees and vanished. At first, I sat there, confused, thermos warm in my gloved hands. I opened it. Steam curled into the frozen air. I waited, glancing behind me every few seconds. 5 minutes. Then 10. I tried reading, but the words wouldn't hold still. My boots started to numb. I stood up, shouted, "Mom?" into the wind. No answer. Just the sound of trees creaking and snow dropping from their limbs. As the sun dipped lower, shadows grew longer. The snow got heavier. I wrapped myself in the blanket, curled into a ball, and whispered her name until I couldn't keep my eyes open. That night, the temperature dropped below 0. I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted in and out of something that felt more like fading. My legs burned, then went numb. My face stung. I dreamt of wolves circling, their eyes glowing yellow. The second day, I stopped hoping. Hunger gnawed at me, but thirst was worse. I scraped snow into my mouth until my lips cracked. I thought maybe she got lost. Maybe she wrecked the car. I imagined she was hurt somewhere, trying to crawl back to me. By the third day, I no longer imagined. I knew. No one was coming. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. That realization hurt more than the cold. I don't remember the snowmobile. I barely recall the voice of the ranger yelling, "We've got her!" or the sound of the engine as they rushed me down the mountain. I faded in and out until warm lights hit my eyes and the smell of antiseptic filled my nose. In the hospital, nurses wrapped me in blankets and fed me tiny spoonfuls of soup. My hands had turned purple. My cheeks were raw. They called it exposure, but didn't tell me how bad it could have been. Then she showed up. Lurleen Vaughn, my mother, walked into that hospital room with fake panic in her voice. Her hair was done, lipstick neat. "I'm here! I'm her mother!" she cried. "She wandered off during a hike. She's been struggling emotionally for weeks." They believed her. Of course they did. She looked the part. Middle-aged white woman, well-spoken, clean coat. They didn't ask me anything. And I didn't know what to say. Would they even believe an 8-year-old over her mother? The doctors called in Child Protective Services. I thought maybe they were there to help, but they were just passing me along. I wasn't allowed to go back with her, thank God. But they didn't call her a criminal. They didn't question her story. They said I needed therapy, that I might have attachment issues. They stamped something in a folder and gave me a new name to protect my identity. I remember looking down at it. Jamie. That wasn't me. That wasn't my name. They moved me to a group home outside Helena, said it was for my safety, said I needed space to process. Lurleen never visited again. No calls, no letters. The other girls asked me why I didn't have any photos, why I didn't talk about my family. I lied, said I was an only child, said my parents died in a car crash. It was easier than explaining the truth, that I'd been left like trash on the side of a snowy road because I was inconvenient. I grew quieter, but not weaker. I watched everything, learned how to read people, what they said and what they didn't. I learned who to trust, and when not to speak at all. Years later, I would learn what trauma looked like in medical charts. I'd hear terms like complex abandonment, early childhood dissociation, and forced identity suppression. But back then, all I knew was this. I didn't exist. Not to her. Not anymore. And if I ever wanted to matter again, I'd have to write myself back into the world. Except, I was part of that family. And they erased me. That thought stayed with me like a splinter you can't dig out. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. It echoed in everything I touched, every document I reviewed, every smile I forced through the years. At the group home, birthdays were a shared affair. The staff did their best to make it feel warm. Paper hats, off-brand cake mix, sometimes a donated teddy bear if you were lucky. That year, for one of the girls named Tasha, they brought out a sheet cake with a candle shaped like a number 11. We all sang. Tasha smiled like it was the best moment of her life. Later that night, I asked one of the caseworkers, Miss Karen, if they knew my real birth date. She hesitated, gently patting my shoulder. "Well, sweetheart," she said, "your file's been sealed since intake." There's a temporary date listed for system use, but nothing official was ever confirmed. I remember nodding like I understood. But inside, something sank, like I had just watched the last piece of myself get swept down a storm drain. No birth certificate, no photos, no story. At 11 years old, I was a blank page in a book everyone else was reading from. I stopped asking questions after that. I learned how to be the easy one. The one who didn't complain, didn't get into fights, didn't ask for extra. The girl who made her bed every morning and said thank you when given day-old clothes. Some staff praised me for my resilience. But it wasn't that. It was strategy. If you didn't give them a reason to remember you, they'd leave you alone. By the time my court hearing came around, roughly 9 months later, I'd already learned to brace myself. You could always feel when a day was going to shift your life. Everything was just a little too quiet. The kind of silence where even the wind outside feels like it's holding its breath. I sat in a child-sized chair at the county courthouse in Helena, facing a group of adults who talked about me as if I were a used appliance. Social workers, a judge, a court-appointed psychologist who'd met me once. They read from a thin stack of documents. Mother claims child has displayed erratic behavior, difficulties following instructions, signs of instability prior to incident. No one looked at me, not once, not even to ask, "Is this true?" When the judge said I would remain in state custody for further psychiatric review, no one flinched. No one mentioned the snow, the 3 days, the frostbite, and Lurleen, she didn't show. Not that day. Not ever again. I'd like to say I was angry, but anger needs a place to land, and mine had no address. For years I carried that silence like armor. And then, one Saturday morning in Missoula, at 29 years old, that silence cracked in the least expected place. A bookstore. I wasn't looking for anything, just wandering the aisles of a local indie shop near downtown, sipping burnt coffee in a paper cup. I paused at the local author's table out of habit. There it was. A hardcover, pale blue jacket, embossed silver font, holding the center, A Mother's Strength, by Lurleen Vaughn. My hands went cold. I didn't touch it at first, just stared, as if it might disappear if I blinked. Eventually, I picked it up, opened to a random page. It didn't take long. Raising my daughter Elowen and my son Joran has been my life's purpose. My knees locked. I sat down right there on the edge of the low display bench. There were photos, full-color spreads in the middle, birthday parties, vacations, Christmas morning with matching pajamas, every image scrubbed clean of my existence. There was no third child, no Arlena. No mention of loss, no footnote. I flipped through every chapter, from holding boundaries as a mother to rebuilding after hardship. Not a single sentence hinted at the girl she left in the woods, the girl whose name was erased. I bought the book, no bag, no receipt, just walked out holding it in my bare hands like a lit fuse. At home, I read every word. Then I read them again, pen in hand. I started annotating the margins, not just with anger, but with precision. That's not true. Joran didn't win that scholarship. He was suspended for academic dishonesty. Elowen left town at 18 and never came back. Ask anyone. Photo date doesn't match. This was 2009. I was still there. It became my dossier, the first page of what I would later call evidence of erasure. The acknowledgments at the back were the final slap. To my son Joran, for staying strong through tragedy, and to Elowen, who always knew how to hold the line. Family is everything. That's what I've always taught them. I set the book down. I didn't throw it, didn't rip it. That would have been too easy. Instead, I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote in all caps, "If family is everything, why did she delete me?" And under that, in smaller print, "She never thought I'd come back. She was right about one thing. I wasn't part of her story anymore. And the first step was watching them from the shadows. It started with an email, simple subject line, no fluff. Hey, I think I found something that belongs to you." The name in the sender field stopped me cold. Emery Jameson. I hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. She was the last friend I had before everything disappeared, before I was the girl without a history, without a last name that anyone would claim. I reread the message 3 times before I let myself breathe again. Arlena, I know this might be strange, but I was going through my attic and found something with your name on it. If this really is you, would you meet up? I'll bring it. Attached was a blurry photo of a pink spiral notebook. I knew it instantly. That was mine. I'd drawn a heart and glitter glue on the cover and written, "Private, no brothers allowed," on the first page. I hadn't seen that notebook since I was 8, Buzz. After a moment of hesitation, I replied, "Yes, I'll come. Name the place." That Saturday, I arrived at a little cafe near the University District in Missoula. It was a chilly afternoon, the kind where everyone walked fast, collars pulled up, hands jammed in pockets. I wore a scarf I'd knitted during my first year at the group home, the same one I wore when I needed to remember who I was before the silence. I spotted Emery at a corner table, fiddling with her phone. Her hair was shorter now, and she wore glasses she didn't used to need. But her eyes, those sharp lake blue eyes, hadn't changed. She looked up, froze. "Arlena?" I nodded, sat down. We didn't hug. Too much time had passed for that, but there was something in the way she pushed the notebook toward me, careful, like handing over evidence, that told me this wasn't just nostalgia. "I found it in a box of my old school stuff," she said. "It had your name inside." I remembered what happened, or at least what they told us back then. I placed my palm flat on the cover. The glitter had faded, but the dent where I'd pressed the heart still showed. "They said you ran away," she whispered. "That you had issues." I opened the notebook slowly. Page after page flooded back. Stick figure drawings of our friend group, a list titled Dogs I Want When I'm Older, doodles of houses with stars for windows. Then the last entry, written in large, uneven print. I asked Mama today why I never get a birthday party. She said, "Ask your brother, he needs it more." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. Not there, not in front of Emery. She glanced away, her voice softer. "You weren't making things up. You knew something was wrong." I nodded. I just didn't have the words for it yet. We stayed for about an hour, catching up in cautious bursts. Emery was married now, had a toddler and another on the way. Lived outside of town, worked part-time as a dental assistant, normal life stuff. Before we parted, she said, "I always wondered what really happened to you. I'm glad you're here, still standing." I smiled. Still standing's a good start. That night, back at my apartment, I pulled down an old storage box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were a few keepsakes from childhood that had survived the shuffle, photos from school field trips, a red ribbon from a spelling bee I barely remembered, and a bundle of loose papers tied with yarn. At the very bottom was an envelope. No stamp, no return address, just my name in shaky cursive across the front. Arlena. I slid the letter out with trembling fingers. The paper had yellowed, and the ink had faded, but I knew that handwriting. Grandma Marvena. She'd lived with us for a while before she passed, quiet, sharp as a tack even in her 70s. She always brought me peppermints when no one else was looking. The letter was torn. Only part of it remained. "If anything ever happens, tell Arlena I saw her. I believed her. And that was it. No signature. No explanation. I sat there for a long time, rereading that sentence. She saw me. She believed me. That fragment hit harder than anything in Lurlene's book, because it meant that someone, at some point, knew the truth and tried, however quietly, to say it out loud. I placed the letter next to the notebook and the annotated memoir on my bed. 3 artifacts. 3 pieces of a life that had been edited, cropped, rewritten. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This was deliberate, a pattern of deletion. In courtrooms, they call it constructive abandonment. In psychology, identity invalidation. But in real life, it's being erased while you're still breathing. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel rage, not right then, just a clarity that cut through everything else like clean ice. They hadn't lost me, they'd removed me. And if they could erase a daughter from the past, I could rebuild myself into the present. I opened my current journal, clicked my pen, and wrote, "I will rebuild my name, word by word." I didn't drive straight into town. I circled it first. It had been over 20 years since I last saw Bozeman, but muscle memory kicked in the moment I hit the outskirts. I took the longer route, off Main Street, then through the back roads behind the school where I'd once played foursquare with dirty mittens and mismatched boots. The town had grown, but not much. The gas station still stood at the edge of Maple Creek. The Lutheran church had added a shiny aluminum ramp, but the steeple was unchanged. Familiarity laced every corner, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trespassing in a world that forgot I ever lived in it. I checked into an Airbnb under the name June Elkins, dyed my hair a few shades darker, and kept my hood up anytime I stepped outside. I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. From the small attic room I rented, above a retired couple's garage, I could see across the hilltops at dusk. That's when I spotted it. The lights. I followed them the next day. Lurlene's house, my childhood home, looked newer. The siding had been replaced. There were decorative shutters now, blue with white trim. I parked down the street and walked past slowly. Christmas lights were strung neatly along the porch rails. A fake wreath with pine cones hung on the front door. It was December, of course. Holiday cheer on full display. Her car, an older Toyota sedan, sat in the driveway. Next to it, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and chrome rims. Joran, of course, so they were still here, still in that house, still pretending. Later that afternoon, I walked through downtown to get a feel for the rhythm of the town again. The streets were busier than I remembered, Boutique shops had taken over some of the old stores. The ice cream parlor was now a vintage barber shop. I spotted a flyer taped to the window of a coffee shop. Bozeman Roots, local entrepreneur fundraiser, hosted by Joran Vaughn. I stepped closer. His face was in the center of the page, airbrushed and confident. Let's build the future of Bozeman together. I clenched my jaw. Not a single word on that flyer mentioned where he came from, what kind of man he actually was. No hint of the Joran who once told me to stay quiet if I didn't want Mom to lose it again. No mention of the teenage boy who walked past me crying in the hallway and said, "This is your fault." I moved past the window, slipping the image into memory. There were no signs of me in this town. I checked the library's digital archive, searched old town newsletters, local school publications, even the church's bulletin board. I didn't exist. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed with a notepad. I listed the things I remembered from this place, events, teachers, addresses, and began cross-referencing them against what was publicly documented. I wasn't just forgotten, I had been scrubbed out. The next morning, I made my move. I walked into a small catering company office on the east side of town, wearing neutral makeup and a soft beige sweater. "I'm June," I said. "I'm in town for a few weeks. I used to do events when I lived up north. Do you have anything part-time?" They were understaffed for the holidays. I got a job within an hour. I didn't ask for specifics, but the owner mentioned their biggest event coming up, a large private party at the Bozeman Lodge, hosted by the Vaughn family. Of course it was. The universe doesn't whisper. It shouts. 2 days later, I stood in the kitchen of the Bozeman Lodge, tying my apron and straightening my name tag. "June," it read. The room smelled of cranberry punch and glazed ham. Chefs shouted directions. Trays of hors d'oeuvres lined the counter. I slipped into server mode, calm and calculated. The ballroom was decorated like a Hallmark movie. Soft gold lights, polished oak floors, perfectly ironed linens. People laughed, toasted, posed for photos in front of a makeshift fireplace prop. It looked like every other charity gala I'd worked, except this time, it was personal. Lurleen wore navy. Hair curled, pearl earrings. She looked like someone's proud aunt, not the woman who once walked away from her daughter in sub-zero temperatures. She was radiant in her lie. I weaved through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes. No one looked at me twice. When I reached her, she turned with a pleasant smile and took a glass. "Thank you, dear," she said. My throat dried, but I didn't flinch. She didn't recognize me. I stepped away before I could say something unforgivable. Later, Joran took the stage. His voice echoed through the speakers. "We are here tonight because of one woman," he began. "A mother who raised us with grit, grace, and God at her side. Through loss, through hardship, through heartbreak, she stood tall. And taught us to stand taller." He raised his glass toward her. "To Lurleen Vaughn, the woman who taught me that family is unconditional." Applause erupted. People wiped their eyes. I slipped away from the crowd, walked down the corridor toward the administration office I'd scoped out earlier. I had about 8 minutes before the dessert service. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found labeled folders for past fundraisers, donor lists, invoices, mailing addresses. One stuck out. Vaughn Family Christmas, 2017. I opened it. Donation receipts. Thank you notes. Press release drafts. Then I saw it. A printed guest list from a decade ago. Names typed in alphabetical order. Vaughn, Elowin, Vaughn, Joran. Under Children in Attendance, one line had been blacked out. Beside it, a handwritten note. Do not list. I took photos of everything, closed the folder, and returned just in time to refill coffee cups. As the night ended, I made my way through the hallway toward the exit. And that's when I heard the voice behind me. "Do I know you from somewhere?" I turned. Joran stood there, hand in his pocket, eyebrows knitted together. Something in his stare lingered a little too long. I smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe I just look like someone you used to walk past without seeing." He laughed a little. Forced. Uneasy. "Well, thanks for helping tonight. We appreciate the support." Support. Right. I nodded, walked past him, and stepped out into the freezing night air. Beneath my coat, I could still feel the notebook in my bag, the one with the torn letter. The one Emery gave me. The one I'd written in as a child, long before I knew what betrayal looked like in pearls and tailored suits. It was starting, and they had no idea. I didn't rush into it. After that night at the gala, after Joran's fake smile and hollow words, I gave myself space. 2 weeks, to be exact. Just enough time to let the noise die down while I planned my next move. My mornings began the same. Coffee from the kitchen downstairs at the Airbnb, a quick nod to the hosts, and then straight to the library. But on Thursday, I changed direction. I headed toward the Bozeman County Records Office with my shoulder bag tight to my side and a different name printed on the ID in my wallet. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I entered. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that dull office glow across rows of steel filing cabinets and aging desktop monitors. I handed over my request with calm fingers. "I'm looking for any financial or legal filings associated with the Vaughn family," I said, 10 to 12 years ago. She blinked once, took the paper, and nodded. "It'll take a minute," she said, already typing. While I waited, I kept my eyes low. There were posters on the wall, child custody info, voter registration deadlines, reminders to report abuse, all the right signs in the wrong place. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Here," the clerk said finally, pushing a printed sheet across the counter. "You can access this record in the back terminal. It's scanned only, no originals for public view." I thanked her, walked to the designated station, and sat down. The terminal creaked under my hand as I clicked into the file. It opened instantly. Voluntary Disclaimer of Inheritance Rights. Signed, Arlena Vaughn, Guardian, Lurleen Vaughn. Dated, 3 weeks after I was found in the snow. I stared at it for a full minute before my eyes moved again. There it was. My name, in stiff, untrained cursive. The A was exaggerated, the tail of the N crooked. It wasn't how I wrote my name then. It wasn't how I write it now. At the bottom, a line of legal print, signed under adult supervision. But I was 8. I didn't even know what inheritance meant at the time. The document had been filed quietly, submitted through a third-party notary. I made a note of the date. Same week, my therapist at the group home mentioned that some parents just can't handle long-term responsibility. I scanned a copy, emailed it to myself, and stood up. As I left the building, the wind outside cut sharper than before, but I felt warmer somehow, like finally pulling a thread that I knew would unravel the whole sweater. That evening, I printed the document and slipped it into a manila folder. No frills, no drama, just the truth on paper. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I parked on the street again, this time a little closer. The Christmas lights were gone now. The porch looked bare. It was mid-January, gray skies overhead, and frost still clinging to the hedges. I walked up the front steps, folder in hand, and knocked. A moment passed, then another. Finally, the door opened. Lurleen looked older than I remembered. Her face was tired, mouth pulled tight like someone holding in a bad thought. She wore a thick cardigan and smelled faintly of lavender and something burnt, maybe toast. Her eyes flicked to my face, unsure. "Can I help you?" she asked. I tilted my head slightly. "Did you ever wonder what happens to a child who signs away their life and doesn't know it?" Her breath caught. "Arlena?" I held her gaze. She blinked once, then again, and something behind her eyes shifted. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition, like seeing a ghost you hoped had stayed buried. "You knew," I said. "You always knew." She opened her mouth but didn't speak, just stepped aside slightly, as if inviting me in without meaning to. I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out the folder. Opened it. Held the document up where she could see it. "This," I said, "is the moment you decided I didn't belong." Her hands trembled as she reached out, fingertips brushing the edge of the page. She didn't take it. "You were so young," she whispered. You didn't understand how complicated things were." "No," I replied. "But you did. And you made sure I stayed silent. This isn't complicated, Mom. It's criminal." The word hung between us. She glanced behind her, nervous, maybe worried Joran was home, but I didn't care. This wasn't for him. I closed the folder, let it fall to the doormat. I'm not here for an apology, I said. This time I'm not asking for answers. I'm building my own. I turned and walked away. Behind me, the door didn't close right away. I didn't look back to see if she cried or if she stood there frozen. I didn't need to. I drove back across town slowly, stopping once for gas. At the station, I bought a pack of gum and a bottle of water. Normal things. Things you do when the rest of your life finally starts to feel like it belongs to you again. When I pulled into the Airbnb driveway, dusk had begun to set. As I grabbed my coat from the passenger seat, I glanced across the road. In the window of the neighboring house, I saw him, Joran, standing there, watching, phone in hand. I didn't flinch. Let him text whoever he wanted, because the game had started. And this time, I wasn't the only one keeping records. Joran's silhouette faded from the window, but the tension he left behind stayed with me long after I got back to the Airbnb. I closed the blinds, double-checked the front lock, then sat on the bed and stared at the folder in my bag, the one with the document I had handed Lurleen the day before. Whatever he texted after I walked away, it didn't matter. My part was done, but I knew theirs wasn't. 1 week later, I got the invitation. Not in the mail. Too traceable. It came through the catering job, slipped casually into the team assignments. Bozeman's annual community gala. Location, Town Hall Ballroom. Dress code, formal service wear. Primary host, Lurleen Vaughn. The theme, family is the foundation. I laughed out loud. A dry, bitter sound that startled the woman working next to me in the kitchen. I quickly covered it with a cough and went back to slicing vegetables. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I planned. I called in a favor. Corvin, my ex, answered after the second ring. I was wondering how long before you called, he said. I need the video, I said simply. He didn't ask which one. He already knew. The following day, we met in a parking lot behind a laundromat outside Missoula. No eye contact, no reminiscing. He handed me a flash drive and said, "It's all in there. If you're gonna use it right." "I will," I said, "and thank you for not deleting it." "Some things are too ugly to erase," he murmured. 3 days later, I stood inside the Bozeman Town Hall Ballroom, hair tucked neatly under my server's cap, name tag pinned crooked on my chest. June, it read. Just June. The room buzzed with small talk and champagne flutes. Polished couples in formal wear floated across the hardwood floor, laughing at stories that probably weren't funny. Long tables sparkled under the soft light of chandeliers. Lurleen's charity branding was everywhere. Banners, programs, even embossed on the dessert napkins. The air smelled like money and old secrets. I moved with purpose, refilling glasses, keeping my head down. Every now and then, I scanned the crowd. Lurleen stood near the podium, all pearls and poise. Joran beside her in a navy suit, pretending to belong. I found the AV tech setting up at the back of the room. I walked up and handed him the flash drive. "These are the updated testimonial slides from Mrs. Vaughn's team," I said. He nodded, plugged it in without a second glance, and just like that, it was in. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. The MC took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Joran Vaughn." Applause erupted. Joran adjusted his tie, grinned, and took the microphone. "My mother raised us with integrity, through loss, through tragedy. We are who we are because of her." He paused, letting the room fill with warm nods and misty smiles. "I wouldn't be here today if not for the woman who taught me how to rebuild, how to forgive, how to love unconditionally." He turned to Lurleen, who looked up at him with tearful pride. "To my mother, Lurleen Vaughn, the foundation of our family." The applause was thunderous, the kind that vibrates through your chest. Lurleen stepped up next. She took her time, smoothed her dress, gave that carefully practiced smile. "To every mother out there doing her best," she began, "you know that the choices we make don't always come with praise. Sometimes we sacrifice without applause. Sometimes we hold the line quietly so our children don't have to suffer later." I felt the bile rise in my throat. She continued, I always believed that family isn't just about who's around during the holidays. It's about who holds you up when everything falls apart. I stepped forward. One hand raised, one voice steady. "I'd like to share a story," I said. Gasps rippled across the room. Heads turned. The MC blinked in confusion. Lurleen froze. Before anyone could stop it, the first recording played. It was my voice. I was 8 years old. She said she'd be right back. I waited 3 nights. A child's voice. Mine. Calm, detailed, quiet. She left me in the woods. Said it was a picnic. I had a thermos and a book. That's all. Murmurs filled the room. Chairs shifted. Someone dropped a fork. Then came the second recording. Corvin's video. It was grainy, shaky, but the audio was clear. Joran's voice. "You know Mom wanted to cut her out, right? Said it was cleaner that way." Off-screen, Lurleen's voice. "It had to be done. She never fit. She didn't understand loyalty." I stood off to the side, letting the words echo. Gasps turned to whispers. Whispers turned to outrage. People stared, some at Lurleen, some at Joran, a few at me. Lurleen didn't speak. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Joran turned red, his voice rising as he tried to talk over the crowd. "This is taken out of context," he shouted. "She edited that." But no one believed him. They weren't listening anymore. They were thinking, remembering, reevaluating. A woman at the back stood and left. A man began recording on his phone. A young couple turned to each other and shook their heads. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked at them all and said, "I just wanted you to hear it, like I had to, alone." Silence fell again. Not the kind you get after a standing ovation. The kind that comes when something true finally hits the floor and doesn't bounce back. I turned, stepped away from the mic, and walked toward the back of the room. No one stopped me. At the far corner near the coffee station, I heard a voice whisper, "We'll need to revisit that award decision." I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't about revenge. It was about returning what they buried. And now, finally, they were the ones scrambling to cover the dirt. They hadn't seen justice land yet, but I was already walking toward it. 3 days had passed since the gala, and the ripples hadn't stopped. First came the whispering in the bakery line, then the sideways glances at the grocery store. Bozeman wasn't a big place, and secrets had a way of bleeding out when someone finally dared to speak. It didn't take long for Joran and Lurleen to respond. They didn't come to me directly, of course. That would have required confrontation, accountability. They did what people like them always do, ran to the microphone and painted themselves as victims. I heard the interview while driving home from the courthouse parking lot. Local AM station. Morning segment, host sounding overly cheerful as always. Today we're joined by 2 beloved members of our community, Lurleen and Joran Vaughn. Folks, there's been a lot of noise online recently. Joran jumped in first. It's a tragic situation, really. Someone from our past has decided to lash out publicly. She's unstable, has a long history of emotional outbursts. We tried to help her, we really did. Lurleen's voice followed, dripping with practiced regret. No mother is perfect, but when someone rewrites the past and uses it to hurt a family trying to move forward, that's not healing, that's vindictiveness. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Joran wrapped it up. There are legal documents, proof. She signed away her inheritance. She wanted nothing to do with us. This is all just attention-seeking. I didn't pull into the Airbnb. I drove straight to Kaylin's office instead. The legal aid building sat at the corner of 2 cracked streets near downtown. Inside, it was quiet except for the sound of copy machines and clicking keyboards. Kaylin was waiting, coffee in hand, hair pulled back like always. I placed the document on her desk, neatly printed, scanned, and filed by me. "The one they're referencing," I said. She opened it, skimmed. "Voluntary disclaimer of inheritance rights," she murmured. "Filed when you were 8? 3 weeks after I was placed in state care." Her eyes narrowed. "This is child handwriting, unwitnessed, and the notary wasn't affiliated with the court. This is void and fraudulent." My breath came easier. "I want to go forward," I said. I'm not here to destroy anyone, but I won't let them rewrite what they did. Kaylin nodded once. Then we file a motion, today. 2 hours later, we submitted the paperwork to the Bozeman County Courthouse. 5 days after that, we stood before a judge. Courtrooms have a certain chill, even when they're warm, not from temperature, but from what they hold. The weight of truth, of lies dressed in suits. Lurleen sat on the left, Joran beside her, arms folded. Their attorney, some man flown in from Billings, looked smug, like this was a waste of time. I didn't look at them, not once. Kaylin opened. Your Honor, we are here to challenge the validity of a document that has been used, publicly and legally, against my client, Ms. Arlena Vaughn. A document signed when she was 8 years old, without proper representation, without legal guardianship, filed by a woman who had, by that time, already relinquished custody of the child. The judge leaned forward. You're referring to the disclaimer of inheritance? Yes, sir. Kaylin clicked the remote. On the screen beside the bench, the document appeared. My name in stiff, awkward handwriting. This, she continued, is the signature of a child. There was a beat of silence. Lurleen shifted. Her attorney spoke. My client acted in accordance with the law. The document was notarized. Kaylin cut him off. The notary wasn't court certified, and more importantly, Ms. Bush Vaughn was in state custody at the time. The mother had no legal authority to sign anything on her behalf. She handed the judge 3 documents. A medical file confirming Arlena was in state-supervised psychological care, a statement from her foster system supervisor, and a timestamp log showing that Lurleen Vaughn appeared in court that week without the child present. The judge flipped through the papers. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his eyes landed on Lurleen. Did you authorize this document? Lurleen swallowed. Her lips parted, but no words came. I believed it was in the family's best interest, she said finally. Kaylin raised an eyebrow. And not in the child's? Lurleen didn't answer. The judge cleared his throat. This is not a hearing to determine guilt or inheritance today, but it is a question of legal misconduct. I see grounds here to open an official investigation into the filing process. Joran stood up. This is ridiculous, he snapped. She walked away. She didn't want to be part of this family. She signed that paper. Nobody forced her. Kaylin remained calm. She was 8. The judge looked at me for the first time. Ms. Vaughn, do you have anything to say? I stood. My voice didn't shake. You wrote me off in ink, I said, but I'm rewriting myself in stone. The courtroom went still. He nodded once. I'm opening a fraud inquiry effective immediately. Court is adjourned. As we gathered our things, I heard murmurs ripple through the room. A man near the back muttered, Guess the Golden family isn't so golden after all. Outside, the air felt sharp, crisp, but clean. Kaylin walked beside me, briefcase in hand. You did well, she said. I nodded. It's not over. No, she agreed. But it's finally started. Justice didn't land with the roar of applause or the slam of a gavel. It arrived in quiet waves, like the hush that follows a long, bitter storm. 2 weeks after the courthouse ruled to open a fraud inquiry, I was called back to Bozeman for the final hearing. Not for drama, for closure. The courthouse smelled of old paper and worn linoleum, and the air was thick with something heavier than nerves. It was reckoning. Kaylin and I sat side by side at the long oak table near the front of the courtroom. She was calm as always, hair pulled back, blazer crisp. She didn't need to say much. The case spoke for itself now. Across the aisle sat Lurleen, in a muted gray blouse and a thin pearl necklace that looked like it hadn't been worn since before her memoir tour. Joran was beside her, jaw clenched, flipping through a legal pad he wouldn't be allowed to read from. News cameras waited outside. Inside, it was just community members, courthouse regulars, and 2 or 3 familiar faces from town. Folks who'd once shaken Lurleen's hand at fundraisers and now couldn't meet her eye. The judge entered, and we all stood. Let's proceed, he said. No ceremony, no preamble. Kaylin stood and walked forward. Your Honor, she began, today we are not here to seek punishment. We are here to formally submit the completed documentation that validates our earlier claim that Ms. Arlena Vaughn's legal rights were intentionally compromised by the unlawful submission of a falsified disclaimer document signed under duress at the age of 8 by her former guardian, Arlena Vaughn. The judge nodded, flipping through the file handed to him by the clerk. The court has reviewed sworn statements, audio records, and legal transcripts substantiating the claims, he said, peering over the top of his glasses. This hearing is for public record only. We will not relitigate the facts already confirmed. He looked toward Lurlene's table. Do the respondents wish to make a statement? Lurlene shifted. Her lawyer whispered something, but she waved him off. She stood slowly, hands clasped at her waist. I thought I was doing what was best, she said softly. There were things going on then. Joran needed support. Arlena was difficult. My pulse didn't change, not anymore. She wasn't ready for the pressure of this family. I thought removing her from the conversation would allow us to move forward, keep the others safe. Kaylin didn't flinch. Neither did I. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Vaughn, this court finds that your actions, though not criminally prosecuted at this stage, constitute an egregious violation of ethical and custodial standards. He turned to the clerk. The court recommends that Ms. C. Vaughn be stripped of all civic honors awarded by the Bozeman Community Board and that her public recognition as a family advocate be rescinded. Further, the publication Holding the Center shall be withdrawn from the community library archives pending review. Joran stood abruptly. This is insane, he hissed. She's still my mother. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. You may sit down, Mr. Vaughn. A murmur rippled through the room. Kaylin leaned toward me. It's your turn if you want it. I rose. They offered me the mic. I didn't need it. My voice carried without amplification. I don't want anyone here to think this is about revenge, I began. It's not. I looked around the room. Some people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. One woman I remembered vaguely from a church picnic sat near the back, lips pressed into a thin line. I was not broken, I continued. I was removed, quietly, strategically. I was told, without being told, that I didn't belong. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. And despite that, I grew. Quietly. Strong. I rebuilt myself without their help, without their recognition, and I'm not here to punish. I'm here to be seen. For the first time since I walked into that building, Lurleen looked directly at me. Her eyes were glassy, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or just fatigue. I stepped back, folded my hands. The judge nodded. Miss Vaughn, thank you. It could have ended there, but I wasn't done. The press conference was held later that afternoon at the Bozeman Community Hall, where just weeks before, Lurleen had stood beaming beneath banners of resilience through family. This time, the microphone belonged to me. I want to thank everyone who reached out, those who believed me and those who listened when they weren't sure they did, I said. The damages awarded to me through this process will not go to personal gain. They'll fund the Snowlight Foundation, a legal and mental health fund for children who've been wrongfully erased by their families or guardians. Because I'm not the only one. Gasps filled the room. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Soon the room was filled with applause, not the kind you give for a performance, but for a stand someone finally took. I walked off stage and didn't look back. Outside, snow had started to fall. Flakes light, scattered, silent. I zipped up my coat and descended the steps just as a reporter called out behind me. Arlena, do you think your mother will ever speak publicly again? I stopped. Another voice. Would you forgive her if she did? I turned halfway, caught sight of Lurleen standing at the far end of the parking lot alone, her pearl necklace gone, scarf pulled tight around her neck. One reporter broke from the pack and jogged toward her. Do you have anything to say to your daughter? She paused. I thought I was protecting my family, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, not escorted, not cheered, just gone. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't chase. I pulled my gloves on, stepped into the snow, and kept moving. The wind brushed my face. But for the first time in my life, it didn't sting. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It never did. A month after the courthouse hearing, I found myself back in Missoula, in the quiet of my one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by something I hadn't truly known in years. Stillness. Not silence in the way I'd learned to fear it as a child. This was different. It was peace that hadn't asked to be earned, but came from taking back what was mine. Boxes began arriving the week after the verdict. Most were filled with handwritten notes, emails printed on letterhead, even drawings. Some came from strangers, women I'd never met, who heard my story through a friend or saw a clip online. Others were from former foster kids who remembered the system, the folders, the files that didn't include birthday cakes or baby pictures. They thanked me, not for speaking out, but for proving someone like me could still rise without bitterness. I read each letter and placed them into a canvas bin beside my desk. When the first bin filled, I ordered another. I spent my mornings drafting the curriculum for the Snowlight Foundation's first youth scholarship program. Not because I had to, but because I wanted the next kid to know someone was watching, someone cared. They wouldn't have to crawl out of the woods alone. By early March, Missoula still wore winter like a frayed scarf. The snow melted slower than it should have, clinging to the edges of curbs and the tips of sidewalks. I was sipping coffee by the window when I heard the knock. It wasn't urgent. Just 3 soft taps. I opened the door expecting a neighbor, maybe someone dropping off a misdelivered package. Instead, a boy stood there, tall, awkward, somewhere between 16 and 17, dark curls and nervous hands, a face that reminded me, uncomfortably, of Joran. "Are you Arlena?" My hand still gripped the doorframe. "Yes." He took a breath. "I'm Liam, Joran's son." I didn't speak at first, just looked at him and waited. "I saw the video," he continued, voice quieter now. "The one from the gala, the stuff that happened after. I know what they said about you, what they didn't say. And I don't think it was right." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've been writing an essay for school about integrity, and I want to help, not just write about it. I want to volunteer for the Snowlight Foundation, if that's okay." There was a long moment where I studied him. Not to judge, but to remember what it felt like to be 16 and brave enough to knock on the door of someone the world told you to forget. "Come in," I said finally. "We'll start with what you know, and build from there." He smiled like a weight had lifted. I stepped aside, let him into the living room, and pointed toward the dining table where folders and coffee mugs sat like old friends. The next day, I visited the assisted living facility on the south side of town. Marlene had been the housekeeper in our family home years before Lorleen replaced her with a younger woman. She had cooked simple meals, swept the floors, and once, when I had strep throat, she made me homemade soup and whispered bedtime stories from her childhood. I hadn't seen her since I was 10. Now, she sat in a recliner, wrapped in a pastel blanket, humming to herself. Her eyes lit up briefly when I said my name, then faded back into confusion. "I used to clean for the Vaughns," she said slowly. "Nice house. Lots of cold air in the hallways, though." She drifted off, then returned. "Your mama didn't look for you," she said, like commenting on the weather. She said, "God was making space." I let the words sit there between us. I didn't argue, didn't correct her. I just reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "She made space," I whispered. "I filled it with something better." That night, I returned home and pulled out an old photo I'd kept hidden in a drawer. It was frayed at the corners, colors faded. A birthday party. Balloons. Cake. A girl. Me. Off to the side. Barely in frame. I wasn't supposed to have taken it when I left. But I did. I stared at that girl. Not out of sorrow, but out of gratitude. Because she survived. I opened my journal, not the old ones, a new one, leather-bound, unmarked. I wrote, "I wasn't erased. I was underestimated. I was left in the snow, and I came back with fire." When I closed the journal, I placed it on the shelf next to a plaque that now bore my name. Founder, the Snowlight Foundation. The room was dim, the sunset trailing off the edge of the blinds, casting soft shadows against the far wall. I heard the mail slot rattle. It was late for delivery, but I crossed the room anyway. A single envelope lay face down on the floor. No return address, no stamp, just postmarked, Bozeman. I opened it slowly. Inside was one line, just one, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw the girl in the snow, and she scared me. There was no signature, no apology, just that. I folded the paper carefully and slid it between the pages of my journal. I didn't need to reply. Some echoes don't need answers. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. Sometimes family isn't who raised you. It's who remembers you when others tried to forget. Arlena's story is about more than survival. It's about reclaiming your voice when others have written you out. What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you became the ones who erased you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more true and emotional family stories that deserve to be heard.